Welcome to the Revolution Church podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Revolution. We're wide today. Letterbox. So we're trying something new. We are going to try this taped beforehand. I am taping it, or whatever you call it. I'm trying to look at this camera because it's right there. So, but yeah, we're taping today. And one of the reasons we're taping is because I was talking to Josh, and Josh was like, "Hey, man, it seems like the YouTube commenters are kind of stressing you out, and your depression has been kind of bad. So why don't you tape it, and we'll just put it up, and we'll make it a little bit easier for you." So, so we're going to give that a try today. But today is like, you don't want to miss it, because today is like the best part of the "You Are Accepted" Paul Tillich sermon. I mean, it's just pure gold. I mean, it really can be read by itself. It's great. Go listen to Peter Rollins read it at wherever you listen or watch Revolution. But also, go read it, Google it, check it out. Go find the shaking of the is that the shaking of the foundations? Yep. Go find this book and read it, because this last part is just, I'm rarely this excited about a talk. This to me is just this part. I loved it so much. I think I put it in I think it's believe it's the ending of my second book. Like, I just decided to end the second book with like the ending of "You Are Accepted." I think I ended up put a little bit in there, and then I put the rest in there for the paperback. So I think if you have the hardcover, there's like a little bit of it, and then when we edit it for the paperback, I was like, so it was my second book. I was like, we got to put the whole thing in there. And probably the best part of the book, because I didn't write it. But we're going to jump in right from where we jumped off. It's so funny today. So today I was with my kids, and I was walking with some of their friends, and one of the friends I didn't know turned around and said, "Are you in the military?" And I was like, "Oh, I like kids' literalistness." And I said, "I'm in the Lord's army, son." No, I didn't. I said, "No, I'm just an old punk rocker." But yeah, let's jump into this, and everything's going to run right into the other. So if you have been following along with these talks, please, like, this is going to be literally like part 3 is going to run right in. Part 2 and part 3, boom. That's one ends, one begins. So check that out. Check out part 1, 2, and 3, because this sermon is worth it. And to be able to just sit down and go over it and get into it. I mean, to me, this "You Are Accepted" is, the first time I read it, I actually read it in a Brennan Manning book. But to me, this talk is the essence of my work, the essence of what Revolution has been doing for many, many years, and what we want to continue to do. So don't forget to like and subscribe. I got to remember to say all that stuff. And honestly, like, if I was to pitch the best way of like why Revolution deserves to be supported and donated to, and like I said, we'd rather have you than your money, but we do need financial support. Like, realizing that this is what we're trying to do, I think would be a great, like, I wish I could just sit down and just be like, hand this book over and just to like fund people, or like to like a millionaire and be like, okay, this is what we're trying to do. So if you think this is worthy of doing, help support us. Anyway, so, we didn't make payroll this week. And that's tough. Been doing this for 30 years. So, I mean, I did have a year where I went almost 6 months without pay. So, right now is not the best place, because I haven't found a lot of part-time work. I found a little bit of part-time work. So I'm just going to be honest. That's where I'm at. And it makes me nervous, because I love doing Revolution. I love this work. and I'd love to do more, not less. But that's just where we're at right now. So if you maybe even think of creative ways we could raise support, or maybe there are groups that would like to, foundations that would like to help support us as well and support this work. You know, it's weird because it's religious, but it's also about bringing peace and acceptance of all people together. So something to think about. Revolutionchurch.com. But anyway, this is it. Let's do it. Are you ready? Because I'm ready. Do we know what it means to be struck by grace? It does not mean that we suddenly believe that God exists or that Jesus is the Savior. What? Or that the Bible contains the truth. Now, and I would have given $1 million, more than that, when I never had $1 million, but I would have given it. I wished I would have known this earlier on in my life. I would have known this the first year when we started Revolution. I would have had so much more confidence. And I quit after a year of doing Revolution because I thought God hated me and took some time off. And the reason I started up back Revolution again is because of this concept of grace that blew me away. That this idea of grace and what it really was. And that's why I haven't stopped for 30 years. That's why I've done it in New York. I've done it in LA. I did it in Atlanta for a very long time, in New York for a very long time. I think we did an okay job in Minneapolis. And now we're online. And why I don't stop is because this message is a message that I can't hear enough. And it kind of takes all the legalism and all the bad theology and kind of causes it to just like melt down. And this is really my hopes for the church. Do we know what it means to be struck by grace? It does not mean that we suddenly believe that God exists or that Jesus is the Savior or that the Bible contains the truth. To believe that something is almost contrary to the meaning of grace. Now, I want you to really hear that. That's the great thing about me reading this, because I'm going to push it really hard and be redundant. To believe that something is almost contrary to the meaning of grace. Furthermore, grace does not mean simply that we are making progress in our moral self-control, in our fight against special faults, whatever our special faults are, or whatever denomination decides our special faults are. And in our relationship to men and society. Moral progress may be a fruit of grace. I do believe it is. Moral progress may be a fruit of grace, but it is not grace itself. And it can even prevent us from receiving grace. I see this so much in churches where people talk about grace and then legalism comes in and they don't want anything to do with it. I mean, I remember people who would leave Revolution over the years. And sometimes would leave just to go other places, but sometimes they leave and go to other churches and get very super religious. And then they come back to me and all of a sudden I'm not religious enough. I'm not Christian enough. I'm not Jesus enough. And they were starting to tell me like, Jay, you know, you're leading people astray. And I'm like, what? Like, you wouldn't be at this place where you're at right now had you not come here and met this person. And you know, I'm like losing my mind. And it was because people think that they somehow work their way out of a need for grace. That grace is, and that's why we say, you know, grace is anarchy, you know, because it doesn't fit any system. And often in the church, we try to just kind of use it as a, you know, as an afterthought or just part of something or part of a theology. And it would be like building a building with zero foundation. It would be like, you know, it would just fall apart and just collapse. And it often does. And we see that. And I see it amongst progressive churches. I see it amongst conservative churches. No one is free from this. I'm awfully really surprised to see the lack of grace within my progressive brothers and sisters in their church, because often they don't, Paul, I don't like Paul. He's homophobic, or he's this or he's that. And all these reasons why not to understand Paul or read Paul or give Paul a second chance. But for me, reading Paul is how I came to understand grace, and it changed my life, and it made me the person I am today, and it gave me these messages. As a matter of fact, this whole sermon is based off of a quote from Paul in Romans 5:20, where it says, "Moreover, the law entered that offense might abound, but where sin abound, grace did much more abound." So this is based on a talk given by the Apostle Paul, or a letter written by the Apostle Paul. So let's think about that. Furthermore, grace does not mean simply that we are making progress in our moral self-control in the fight against special faults, in our relationship to men and to sociality. Moral progress may be a fruit of grace, but it is not grace itself. You hear that? Moral progress may be a fruit. Remember, it is a fruit of grace. It is building on a foundation. It is growing from a tree. Without that tree, there is no fruit. There is no fruit of that. So that's another thing to remember. Like, it may just be a fruit. It might be a fruit of grace, but grace is the tree. So the fruit's just not going to pop out into nowhere. So moral progress may be a fruit of grace, but it is not grace itself. And it can even prevent us from receiving grace. And I don't know how many times I've seen that happen. And I think when we can see that happen is when people fail, when people make mistakes, when teachers, preachers, people say things we don't like, and all of a sudden there's no room for grace or forgiveness or restoration for them. So not only does it prevent someone from receiving grace, it usually prevents us from giving grace as well, which is tragic. So it can prevent us from receiving grace. For there is too often a graceless acceptance of Christian doctrine and a graceless battle against the structures of evil in our personalities, such as graceless relation to God may lead us to necessity to either to arrogance or despair. And I will tell you that's what I've seen. I see so many people online and talking about this stuff. And I guess that's the interesting thing about online is seeing how people interact. And they're either arrogant and saying like, oh, all of those people are fools, all those people are idiots and they don't understand it. And it's all this scapegoating. So you have this graceless Christianity that's like, oh no, I love and I feed the poor, I do all this, but these people are the problem over here, or you're the problem, or he's the problem, I'm the problem, and it's this graceless battle of the structures of evil and personalities. So such a graceless relation to God may lead us necessarily either to arrogance or to despair. For me, it led to despair. To me, I just didn't want anything. I didn't want to live anymore. I didn't want to do anything anymore. I didn't want to think anything anymore. I didn't want anything to do with religion anymore. And I see that too, and it's so funny because I see these folks who have like social media accounts and it's like, no more Jesus. Jesus is stupid. God done. X this. No more evangelical. It's all this stuff. And it's almost so that they're in such despair because they've seen such a lack of grace within religion that they wear the despair literally in their freaking titles, and they make all their whole work on this disparity of how horrible the church is. Or we use blanket statements, or we use these big wide painting strokes of just, and it just destroys everybody, and we forget about grace. There's not a lot of things that make me angry. I remember one thing that really made me angry is I think I've heard a couple people, not many, a few people be like, oh, grace is manipulative. Or there was this guy who wrote a poem about grace that was really negative. And honestly, those are really the only thing that make me angry, because I feel like you don't know what you're doing, because you're taking something that doesn't work by anyone else's structure, not even our own structure. So we may think it's unfair. We may think it's manipulative, but it doesn't work that way. And then we critique it. But my fear is when we publicly critique this, you're saying, maybe you're leading someone away from grace. And to me, that's the worst thing you can do, not lead somebody away from Christianity or the church. That might actually be the most positive thing. I actually know people who got out of the church and became better people. But leading people away from grace, to me, is, those are just, you're going to get an argument from me. I'll try to be graceful, but you will. That's when I go, that to me is really, really missing it. And that causes me to have despair. So seeing that type of arrogance that goes towards like this fetal, but to me that means also always usually tells me that this person doesn't understand the magnitude of grace, and that it is the very foundation of this whole system that we talk about. It's why it's about forgiveness. It's why it's about loving your enemies. It's why it's doing good to those who persecute you. It's why it's turning the other cheek. It's also why you wipe the dust from your feet sometimes when you can't get in there, because you have to give yourself grace and hope that someone else can deliver grace better than what you did or not. But sometimes you do have to move on and give yourself grace. So it's so complicated, but I think it's something that we all have to kind of go through and experience on our own, but we can share with others that it's really bigger than any of us, bigger than denominations, bigger than religion. It's big. I might sound like a heretic or a madman right now, but this is my passion. Grace has always been my passion. And it's the reason I've been doing this work for 30 years. And come rain or shine or hell high water, when we're supported and when we're not supported. From every city to city I've gone. To me, it's not been about where I am as much as it is the message. The message of grace has always been the most vital thing, and sometimes grace is shown without words at all. All right, sorry, I went a little bit hard on that, but that's why. So such a graceless relation to God may lead us by necessity either to arrogance or despair. It would be better to refuse God and Christ and the Bible than to accept them without grace. For if we accept without grace, we do so in the state of separation and can only succeed in deepening that separation. So when people say, well, why do you call yourself a Paulinian pastor or Paulinian speaker? Why do you do? And it's because of this message of grace. It's because I was able to see Christ more clearly through the lens of Paul's teachings of grace. And that worked for me in a beautiful way. It literally just made me go like, and over time it has allowed me to accept myself more and more and more and more every day. But when it says for if we accept it without grace, we do so in the state of separation, and we can only succeed in depending on the separation. And I did a little update on Instagram. I did a little video of just things I've been going through and why I talk so much about grace. And I've tried to reach out to some people who I've had issues with, and excuse me for a second, and gotten pushback. And allergies. But I've seen this acceptance without grace that's built on this kind of depending on separation. And, I went to one person who's a pretty big author and writer and in theology and things, and reached out to them. They said some really things about my father that weren't true, and I carried it for years. And so I tried to reach out and say, listen, I want to make peace. And they just were like, oh, I don't really remember. Oh, it's not that big of a deal. I've got no, and it was just separation, just like, I don't want to talk about this. Instagram's not the place to talk about it. So, well, here's my phone number. Well, I don't really remember, so I don't know how we talk about it. So go in peace. Bye-bye. And it was just this nothing but separation. And if Tillich is right that sin is separation, this is what I was feeling from this person. I went to another person and said, hey, something you put up really hurt me. It felt like a personal attack. They explained that it wasn't, but then they said they don't care who they hurt. They don't care if it hurts me. They don't know. And what was it more? Separation. And so I see this in the church today, and it's not just bad evangelical thing. It is everybody in church today. I see, not everybody, but a lot of people, a lot of very vocal people seem to be pushing people away with this separation. There seems to be a lack of grace. And so I feel like people on the right have used Paul in a way that's not very constructive, and they've accepted books by Paul that aren't Paul. They say they're by Paul, but they're reactionary Paul, like the pastoral epistles, and hurt people. And so those people reacted and just said, well, we don't get it. But that's why I feel like there's this missing grace, this missing reunion with people in the body, because it's all just like, oh, each his own. We're all lone rangers. We're all in this together, and nobody has to deal with it. No one has to deal with the hard part of reconciliation. And so we miss out on this, and it's desperately sad. And so what I want to say to some of you, like, if you've gone through that, it's because you've seen this. This is what you've been seeing. You've seen, we do so in a state of separation can only succeed in deepening the separation. So what you've seen and what you've experienced is a deepening of separation. And this is what I see all the time. And it drives me absolutely nuts. And that's why I'm doing this on a video tape today, because dealing with those folks and then dealing with some of the trolls and things, I just need a little break for my mind, because sometimes this stuff really overwhelms me. But it's the work I do, and it's the work I love to do. But we all need to take time for ourselves and self-care. We'll go on. We cannot transform our lives unless we allow them to be transformed by that stroke of grace. It happens or it does not happen. And it certainly does not happen if we try to force it upon ourselves. Just as it shall not happen so long as we think in ourselves complacency that we have no need of it. And so, often arrogance runs in, things come in, well, I don't really need that. I'm accepted, or I'm a great speaker, I'm a great communicator, I'm a great writer, I have success. And I think that's why you see a lot of people do really beautiful work when they're down and out, or we grow a lot of the times when we're going through poverty, or we're going through failure, or we're going through that stuff. Because we don't have the convenience of being complacent. We don't have, we desperately need a miracle. We do desperately need grace in our lives. And it's not us pushing this grace away. And so when we act as we have no need for it, or that, like I would say, a lot of people, well, I don't really need Paul. I've just got the Gospels and that's fine by me. I go, well, that's hurting you and it's hurting others. Grace strikes us when we are in great pain. You hear this? Restlessness. It strikes us when we walk through the dark valley of meaninglessness and empty life. It strikes us when we feel that our separation is deeper than usual. And I felt that so much lately. And that's why when I was studying this, I was just like, that's why I'm so excited about it right now, is because I was really feeling like a separation deeper than usual from my fellow Christians, my brothers and sisters and stuff in Christ. Like, I just don't feel like do I really have a place to belong? And then reading this kind of reminded me, like, yeah, I do, and this is why I preach this stuff. It strikes us when we feel that our separation is deeper than usual because we have violated another life, a life which we loved or from which we were estranged. It strikes us when our disgust for our own being, our indifference, our weakness, our hostility, and our lack of direction and composure have become intolerable to us. God, I know that feeling as well. It strikes us when year after year, the longed for perfection, listen to this, the longed for perfection of life does not appear. When the old compulsions reign within us as they have for decades, when despair destroys all joy and courage, something at that moment, a wave of light breaks into our darkness. And it is as though a voice were saying, you are accepted. You are accepted. Accepted by that which is greater than you, and the name of which you do not know. Do not ask for that name now. Perhaps you will find it later. Do not try to do anything now. Perhaps later you will do much. Do not seek for anything. Do not perform anything. Do not intend anything. Simply accept the fact that you are accepted. If that happens to us, we experience grace. So this is when people ask me, what is grace? How do I understand grace? What does it really mean? Is it unmerited favor? This goes beyond that. I mean, Tillich really takes his understanding of philosophy and theology and strips grace down to its essence. And so, this idea of like, sometimes I feel pressure to perform, like, oh, I should do more content. I should make more of this. I should do this. You should all over yourself. And there are moments where you just have to sit within that grace. You just have to, I'm not going to try to prove that I believe something or I don't believe something or I think something. I'm not going to try to do anything. I'm just going to know that I am accepted. And my mom wrote this book called I Gotta Be Me. And I feel like that was her essence of who she was, is that she knew she was accepted, and that she knew if she was accepted, that God didn't make any junk. Because if she wasn't junk, nobody was junk. And that's how she felt, and that's what she teached. And that's another foundation that I'm glad to have in my life to build off of, is this person who could be in the room with drag queens and then could be in the room with Southern Baptists the next day and just love everybody. There wasn't goodies and baddies. It was just some people misunderstood. Some people have misinformation. Some people don't realize that they are accepted. As such an experience, we may not be better than before, And we may not believe more than before, but everything is transformed. And that moment, grace conquers sin. And reconciliation bridges the gulf of estrangement. And nothing is demanded of this experience. No religious or moral or intellectual preposition, nothing but acceptance. And I love that because it's like grace conquers sin. And part of that idea is when you go, like, part of the sin's power is usually what other people give it to. They're like, oh, you failed and you can't be forgiven, or you have to do this, and all these if, ands, and buts. Or you're not preaching the right thing, or, oh, we just have different things, and when people are showing a lack of grace to you and amplifying your failure or amplifying your separation or their separation even more. But within grace, you can know where you sit. I remember when one of my board members was not happy that I was affirming LGBTQ folks, and he told me that God was against me. And I said, no. The Father is quite fond of me. It was quoting Brennan Manning. And I said that once to somebody else. I'm like, well, God does love you, but... And it wasn't that. It wasn't God, but... I knew where I stood. And he just kind of stepped back and didn't know what to say because I was just so sure of it. And it was because of readings like this, books like this, and reading Brennan Manning and reading about grace and being like, you can try to project separation on me. You can try to say that, but I just know it's not true. And there's nothing I can do more or less of to change that. And that's honestly how I got sober. I thought God hated me because I was a drunk. And then when I realized God loved me if I was a drunk or if I was a preacher, nothing changed. I was able to get sober because I wanted to get sober for myself and because I didn't want to be miserable anymore and I didn't want to hurt anybody. I didn't want to crash my car, those types of things. So nothing is demanded of us. Experience no religious or moral or intellectual presumptions, nothing but acceptance. And this also makes people angry. People don't like this kind of grace. This is why people fear grace. Because grace is anarchy and it doesn't fit into their system or their theology or their teaching or their way of thinking. But that's the great thing about grace. It just is. You just are accepted. In the light of this grace, we perceive the power of grace in our relation to others and to ourselves. And this is the great thing, is that grace doesn't only just come into us, but allows us to kind of see that relation with others. It allows us to kind of own our side of the street, and also allows us to give them a little bit more grace. And sometimes that grace is just saying, letting people be, but it's not always. Sometimes it's going to them and saying, hey, you've hurt me, or hey, you've done this. Hey, this needs to change. And you have the grace to go like, I'm not going to give up on you. I'm going to annoy you with the fact that I think you've got more than this, because I think there's something that you're missing. There's a reunion that you're missing. There's an acceptance that you're missing. And I think you're angry. You're preaching these things because you're missing this. So it gives you both of those things. It's not, people think like, oh, well, what are we going to just do nothing? And we're just going to accept all these people like trying to put their religion on us and put their rules and laws and regulations on us and discriminate against. No, we've got to work for justice. Those are things that I believe in. But grace is even outside of that system. Grace accepts you where you're at and gives you the ability to work. It gives you the ability to sit in front of people who don't recognize your right to be a human being. People who think you're a heretic, people who think you're going to hell or you're dragging the whole world to hell with you. It gives you the ability to sit in front of those people and have a conversation. Also gives you the ability to go like, oh, you know what? You might have been right about something, and I'm sorry I missed it. But that's not what we're talking about right now, right? We're just talking about nothing but acceptance. In the light of this grace, we perceive the power of grace in our relation to others and to ourselves. We experience the grace of being able to look frankly into the eyes of another, the miraculous grace of reunion, of life with life. We experience the grace of understanding each other's words. We understand not merely the literal meaning of the words, but also that which lies behind them, even when they are harsh or angry. For even then, there is a longing to break through the walls of separation. Remember earlier on, Tillich was talking about in the same sermon, is anger towards others is usually an anger directed at oneself as well. And so the grace gives us the ability to see that. I know I feel like I'm selling a chamois that does and cleans and it does everything. It slices, it dices, it cleans, it beans, But that's to me what grace is, So maybe I need to do a late night infomercial about grace. For even then, there is a longing to break through those walls of separation. I mean, I believe it's Hegel who talks about this, that even when we have like arguments and stuff, there's this recognition of one another's humanity. Like if we have arguments in person, we are able to disagree, but that there's something within us when we have those disagreements and those arguments is where we experience the humanity of the other and they experience the humanity of us. A reunion of life with life. We experience the grace of understanding each other's words. We understand not merely the literal meaning of the words, but also that for which lies behind them, even when they are harsh or angry. For even then, there is a longing to break through the walls of separation. We experience grace of being able to accept a life of another, even if it be hostile and harmful for us. Once again, like this to me is like we're all lacking in this. And to me, this is the work of revolution. This is my work. My life's work is to help people understand what Tillich so eloquently put here is that, we are being able to accept the life of another, even if it be hostile and harmful to us. For through grace, we know that it belongs to the same ground of being which we belong, by which we have been accepted. So when we hear things about loving your enemy, this is what it's talking about. You literally are able to go, my enemy belongs to the same ground of being. We are from the same stuff. We are made out of the same old dirt. Like my mom used to say, we're the same old junk. And that's where we become radical. That's where we see a reformation in the church today. Not within church, but I think within religion and within politics and things like that, when we're able to see that, because that allows us to walk into those areas of having hard conversations and tough conversations and recognize the ground of being within others' eyes, the humanity, within one another. And so this isn't just a dream. This isn't just something made up. I mean, if someone made something up like this, then it's beautiful, but to me, this is what I've tried to do. This is when I call people on the phone and say, we can argue better, we can do better, we can disagree better. And then people are like, I can't do it if you don't recognize, because they're so angry. They're so stuck within their separation and their hurt and their pain. They can't do it. And I just want to be like, sit in grace, sit in acceptance, know you're loved, and do it in a way that doesn't sound like you're talking down to them, because that can often happen too, but just helping people know they're accepted. That's the work. And doing that. And I think that's what Dr. King set an example of. I think that's what John Hume set an example of when he said, it's not just going to be Catholics and Protestants. We can't just do it all Catholics. We've got to bring in Protestants into this thing too. We've got to bring everybody into this thing. We've all got to get different views and different, and it's only going to work if we all do it together. We're only going to reach unity through diversity if we're really diverse and we're able to work together. And yes, we might have to compromise, and yes, we might have to do things like that, but that's the only way that this type of concept of unity will work, as if everybody's involved, because that's true unity. People get mad at me. I posted something about unity and people got mad at me and they're like, oh, you want this and this and unity's overrated and all this stuff. I'm going like, but not actual unity, false unity, counterfeit unity, just like counterfeit love. That's like, oh, I love you, but I'm going to tell you you're a piece of shit. You're going like, that's not love. That's counterfeit love. That's pretending to be love. False. And this person was using all these things. And I go, well, no, I grew up in that area too. And I know what that is. And that's not real unity. Unless everyone's participating in it, that's not unity through diversity. Anyway, I digress. But I believe this is where we are lacking, and I believe this is where the church is lacking. And if we don't understand it, if we don't grasp it, the church is done. I do believe that. And maybe that's what needs to happen. I don't know. Maybe that's the only way for reformation, of a true reformation of grace, where all people are participants, can happen. And I'll tell you what, it really does lower your anger and your resentment, and it puts it in a place to help you understand it better. and you're able to look at someone without hate and able to look at them and go like, okay, well, there's the misinformation. This is what we're disagreeing on, but they are still human. We experience the grace of being able to accept the life of another, even the hostile and harmful to us. For through grace, we know that it belongs to the same ground to which we belong and by which we have been accepted. We experience that grace which is able to overcome the tragic separation. Now listen to this. This is a nail on the head. Overcome the tragic separation of the sexes, of the generations. So next time you go, okay, boomer or Gen X or millennials, or, next time you want to scapegoat those folks, think about this. It overcomes the tragic separation. And this was written in the 50s, okay? And think about how much more we are separated now, and how much more that this message, and thank the stars, thanks the grounds of being that it was written down. Overcome this tragic separation of the sexes, of the generations, of the nations, of the races, and even the utter strangeness between man and nature. Now, this is why I believe that Tillich was one of Dr. King's favorite theologians and philosophers, is because of this type of message. Sometimes grace appears in all these separations to reunite us with those to whom we belong. For life belongs to life. That's all people. That's everyone. This is the point. This is the point of why no scapegoating, why our hard conversations, why all this is, because we're all part of that ground of being. We're all part of that, all of us. And I'm sure you have people in your mind right now, you're like, well, not this guy, or not that person, or not that person. And in the light of this grace, we perceive the power of grace in our relation to ourselves. This is where really healing becomes, and when we're able to experience grace is when this healing comes to ourselves. We experience a moment in which we accept ourselves because we feel that we have been accepted by that which is greater than we. And like earlier, he said, no need to name it, no need to know more about it, just you are accepted. I think a lot of folks find this in 12 steps. Especially folks who've been hurt by the church, and they go, I can't call it God, but I just have to turn my will and understanding to something greater than my understanding, something that's greater than me, something bigger than my understanding. If only more such moments were given to us, for it is in such moments that we make us love our life, that make us accept ourselves, not in our goodness and self-compliancy, but in our certainty of the eternal meaning of our life. We cannot force ourselves to accept ourselves. It's true, you can't. We can't compel anyone to accept themselves. But something that happens, but sometimes it happens that we receive the power to say yes to ourselves. That peace enters into us and makes us whole. The self-hate and the self-contempt and the disappear. And that our self is reunited with itself. Then we can say that grace has come upon us. And this is my goal to see in the church and for all people in Christianity and all people outside of Christianity. To me, it's not about selling a religion. To me, it's about this message that is of acceptance and grace and trusting that it leads to where it should lead. But you think about this when Tillich said earlier, let's see if I can find it. Cruelty towards others is always cruelty towards ourselves, So when that peace enters us and makes us whole, and that self-hate and that self-contempt disappear, that hate and that contempt towards the other also starts to automatically disappear, because we're no longer projecting that onto the other and delivering that to other to try to get it off of our heart or our minds or our guilt. We're able to see humanity in a very different way. Then we can say that grace has come upon us. Sin and grace are strange words, but not strange things. We find them whenever we look into ourselves with searching eyes and loving hearts. They determine our life. They abound within us and in all of life. All of life. I love that. All of life. This is when I don't mind using broad strokes when it comes to grace and separation. They abound within us all and all of life. May grace more abound within us. So this last part could just be the mission statement for what Revolution does in our work, honestly. Grace has allowed me to do hard work and have hard conversations with people and help try to grow and change with people and learn how to compromise and learn how to rise above even contradictions with other people. Grace does that. It's one of those things that I'm not afraid to ever push too much of. And so I hope this has helped you. I hope you'll listen to this talk a couple times if you need to. I hope you'll read this talk. I hope you'll listen to Pete Rollins reading this talk. But I think like this is probably the most important talk I've given all year is this one, because it just, it's someone else's word. It clearly states what we're trying to do. And it says it in a very precise way, and why we talk so much about not othering and loving our enemies and doing good to those who persecute us and those type of things. But so many people, even the most progressive pastors amongst us that I sit down with, tell me, well, I don't actually preach that they love because you don't want people to go back into harm's way. And we don't. But it's also understanding the nuances of those things and how that works. And grace allows us to have a clear picture of that. Self-acceptance allows us to have a greater share of that. And you often don't put yourself in those situations when you accept grace because you know you're accepted, that you don't need to put, because often we put ourselves in that situation because our unconscious tells us to repeat a behavior, maybe the way we were raised or the way we grew up in a certain group of people or thing, and that grace allows us to kind of, oh, that's not the best place for me. So, and there's so many people in the world that, the more people that know about grace and accept grace and are able to really understand this, I think the better things get. I don't think we'd have to have so many denominations and things like that. I think we'd be able to see politics the other way, and also those people who support politics different than us in a unique way, and have really mercy for those who are angry and hateful towards us rather than contempt. I just think contempt breeds contempt. But grace, which is related to love, that's game changer. So that's the message. That's the message of Revolution. That's the message of Jay Baker. Maybe one day on my tombstone they'll write "Too much grace." It's not easy. It's not easy to practice. It's hard to accept that you're accepted sometimes, because everyone does everything they can to tell you that you're not, that what you're doing is wrong, and to steal hope from each other and to steal hope from you, so it's tough. But you don't stop trying. Like, be very Buddhist about it. To be like, I am accepted. You are accepted, despite what anybody else says, despite what I say. And that's why I want Revolution to be able to be my main source of income and my main source of living and my main job. And what I do is because I just want to tell more and more people about it. And I want you to help me do that. I want us to do it together. That's why we're gathering. Where 2 or 3 are gathered together. And you guys are all over the world. And I hope this helps. I hope this helps you feel I hope it helps you feel better about yourself, but also helps you to put a little more grace when you're thinking of others who have separated. I mean, I think it's maybe the only way I still continue to have contact with certain people in my life. People who have hurt me and really said some awful things. But then the complexities start to become clear. So I just want to say you are accepted. You are accepted. I am accepted. We are accepted. So thank you for this time together, folks. Like I said earlier in the talk, we really do need financial support, but I don't want you giving money that you don't have. No one is going to get rich here. Basically, pay your bills, pay my money, pay my paycheck. We pay the bills for our social media stuff and all that. We would love to do more. We just can't afford to do it. Not under our budget by any means. And we have been on the basic budget ever since COVID, I think, really. Like I said, last year I went 6 months without receiving pay. So that's just clear what's going on. So we could use your support. But like I said, take your kids out, go to a movie, have a burger, do all that first. And if you got something left that you think, hey, I could help somebody with this, and Revolution's doing good stuff, and you like what we're doing, please consider supporting us. And we'll continue on, and hopefully we will make a way where there is no way. And we will even find grace in that situation. So thank you all. Thanks for listening. Thanks for coming out today. Thanks for listening wherever you're listening or watching wherever you're watching. And it doesn't get much better than this, but I'll try to think of something for next week. So see you then. Thank you so much. Love you.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed this podcast. To make your 100% tax-deductible donation today, please visit revolutionchurch.com/donate. You can also learn more by clicking the donate section on the website.